I'm your host, Bradley Martin, and this is Clearing the Way, a resource for small business owners. Hello, humans. Welcome back to Clearing the Way. I am your host, Bradley Martin. My goal is to uncover the challenges that small business owners face along their way so that you can be better prepared when you experience something similar. My guest today is a fun one of my longest friends. Preston Miller, owner of Rusted Barrel BBQ. Preston chokeslammed me in 5th grade because I pulled his chair out from underneath him as he sat down in Mr. Colborne's class. That was pretty cool. Preston graduated from Triangle Tech with an associate degree in welding. He's worked in oil and gas for almost 10 years, working his way up as high as an Operations Supervisor. Preston has been a lifelong cook, which is something that we've kind of bonded over since early in our friendship. We used to doctor up our ramen with shrimp and whatever else you had in your house. So that was kind of fun. In May of 2019, he decided to take it a little bit more seriously, though, investing in a food truck and opening Rusted Barrel BBQ. Preston, thank you for being my friend, and thank you for being a guest number 3 on Clearing the Way.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So did I get all that right? Anything I missed there?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Okay, so let's start in school. So obviously I've got a pretty good idea of who you were, but let's kind of work up to the point where you decided that you were going to start a business. So as a student, what were you? Actually, I'm not sure if I know the answer to this. Were you a good student?
I got good
like
grades.
All the way back into like elementary school, all the way back. Like, were you?
Yeah, I think I had straight A's until I was in 7th grade. And then started to get older, started to care less about school. I still got good grades, but I put a lot less effort forward. So I ended up with good grades. I'd say, average. But I definitely could have had better grades if I would have put forth more effort.
Yeah. Were you wrestled?
Yes.
That was it, right? Wrestled, ski club, some of that stuff. But no other sports. Actually, Cliff, who was just on this afternoon, he also wrestled. So there's some kind of similarities in like one of the things that he mentioned though was that you didn't really get the camaraderie, like the team aspect in wrestling. At least he didn't because of some of his aspirations. But was there anything, I guess if you weren't playing other sports, you didn't have that to compare to. But, okay, so good student. Did you know what you wanted to do coming out of school?
So I thought that I wanted to be a welder. So I liked shop class the most. It made the most sense to me. Learning algebra didn't make any sense to me, which is funny because I use it in my job now. But at the time, learning, the various normal curriculum of, X equals Y, that kind of stuff didn't make any sense for me to learn. To me, made more sense for me to learn a trade because I thought that was a better way for me to make money.
Were you, were there any other clubs or anything that you were a part of? Like, were there any of those, like, I don't know if there were any, like, woodshop clubs or anything like that, but was there anything like that you were a part of?
No, I was a member of 4-H since the time I was a little kid. We always had animals on the farm, stuff like that. But other than that, no other big clubs. I was a Cub Scout when I was little, but then that didn't last very long.
Why not?
It's they were teaching me how to do stuff that I felt like I already knew how to do. Like I remember like 10 years old and they're like teaching you how to use a pocket knife, and I'm like, I've carried a pocket knife for the last 3 years. So like,
yeah. Okay, that seems reasonable. All right, so why did you choose welding?
I chose welding because I was good at it.
how did you know that you were good at it? Like before, did you do any welding in high school?
Yeah. So I welded in high school with Mr. Husk. He thought that I was pretty good at it, and like I spent more time welding than everybody else did. I thought it was I liked welding more than wood shop, and I wanted to do something with my hands. I liked welding more because you can make mistakes and you can fix them.
Okay. Makes sense.
Wood shop, once you cut wood once, you can't really do anything. Metal, if you cut it wrong, you weld it back together and basically start from scratch. So I liked that aspect of it, and that's why I was interested in welding.
Did you? So I don't know much about this. When you were choosing to go into welding, did you know what you wanted to do with that?
At the time, I wanted to work on the pipeline because that was around the time that it was, the pipelines were going in this area. It was getting big. There was a lot of work. I was hearing stories of guys that were a little bit older than us that were making, crazy money, and that was definitely alluring.
Okay. Okay, so you so welding, and then so I mean, kind of your plan has it kind of worked up to that point. You got into the industry you were looking for, and were you still as interested in cooking through that whole, like, I know it was something we did a lot when we were younger, but did that continue through high school maybe? I don't know when we were even, I mean, that was like middle school that we used to do that shit.
I mean, it was definitely there. My dad has catered since I was a little kid, and I helped him. I continued to help him through high school, just graduation parties and that kind of stuff. And the first job that I had after I graduated high school was at a pizza shop. I was delivering pizzas, but I was also making the pizzas, and I enjoyed making the pizzas a lot more than I did delivering them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so and then through how about okay, so you started at well, we don't have to talk about companies. When you started in oil and gas, were you still was there any were you helping your dad at all at that point, or was there anything food related? I mean, other than like cooking for yourself, like was there anything outside of that?
No, just cooking for myself.
Okay. So at what point did you start thinking more seriously about food again? Like when did that actually happen?
So the big thing that kicked it off was when my dad catered. So he had a cooker. They call it a pig cooker. Bought it in South Carolina.
Also, this is starting to get better.
So it's a barrel about the size of this table, so about the width of a car, and it would open up. It was propane assisted, and you threw wood chips on top of a metal plate, and he used it to smoke chicken, and you could fit half of a hog on there, and then that's what my dad used to cater. So I wanted to borrow it from him. I can't remember why. I was making chicken for something. But I went over, he said, yeah, you can borrow it. I went over to borrow it, and it was like falling apart, just rotted out with rust. It was dirty. One of the tires was flat. The safety chains were missing for the trailer part.
It seems like something that your dad owns.
So it ended up being a weekend of cutting out rusted metal, welding in new metal, replacing the burner, replacing the tire, replacing basically the whole towing part of it. And I basically rebuilt the thing, and rebuilt this rusted out barrel, which I'm sure we'll get to later.
Yeah.
So I redid that, and then once I redid it, I wanted to use it. Like I put all this work into it. So I cooked on it a few times for family and stuff. And then one of the pictures, I sent it to one of the guys at work of all these. It was a bunch of half chickens all the way across the grill, and I sent it to him. And he said, "Do you ever make ribs?" And I said, "Yeah, I can make ribs." Honestly, I'm not that big of a fan of ribs, which sounds crazy to be a person in my position. But I'm not.
But you also don't like barbecue sauce.
Not a big fan of barbecue sauce either.
You don't like barbecue sauce, and you make but okay.
Go ahead. I'm not a big rib guy. But he said, I do a rib cook-off in my backyard every year. He said some of the local guys, he said, come and, throw down and see who's the best. And would you be interested? I was like, yeah, I'll definitely do it. I've always liked cooking. I liked cooking competitively. Even whenever, I think the first competition I ever did was I was 10 years old and I cooked at a fair, and it was a creative competition to see what you could make with Spam.
Okay, I didn't know about that. So, okay, that's interesting. How'd you do, first of all? What did you do with it? What did you make?
I don't want to say I won because I don't really remember, but I think I won.
Okay.
Or I was definitely in the top 3. I don't think I won, but I was close.
You were up there. You did well.
So I did like a version of I think it was like a ranch, like a snack wrap, like a McDonald's snack wrap, but
Okay.
it was Spam.
That actually would have been around the time that snack wraps were a hot jam.
Yeah, so it was kind of like that was whenever wraps were like becoming a thing. So like this, I think it was like a snack wrap with like grilled Spam, little pieces.
That doesn't sound great, if I'm being honest, but
it wasn't bad. But
I mean, if you have to use Spam, I guess that's pretty solid.
But yeah, there was that, and then my mom always did the chili cook-offs. There was a couple chili cook-offs in Washington that she always did. She had a really good chili recipe, so I'd help her, and we'd make like 2 versions of it, and she'd enter mine, and I won the Arms Club chili cook-off whenever I think I was like 14, and then I think I placed at the Meadows Casino used to have when it was just the Meadows racetrack. They used to have one every year, and I think we did well in that one when I was a little kid too.
Huh. Okay, I didn't know any of that, I don't think.
So, like, that it's fun. I mean, it's fun to win a competition of anything.
Yeah.
So,
it's fun to win.
As soon as he said, competition, sounded like there was a lot of drinking involved, and I have this grill that I just completely redid. I was like, I'm in. Well, this was like, I think it was a month before the cook-off. Kind of put it off, and then I think it was like a week or 2 before the cook-off. I went and I bought because to be honest, I've made ribs, but...
Yeah. Well, the way you answered the question, do you make ribs? And you say, yeah, I can make ribs. That's a pretty clear indicator of, yeah, I've made them before, but, like, they're not my thing.
Right.
Like, I know how to. I can make them, but they're not my thing.
So what I did was I went and I bought a case of ribs, which is 15 racks. And I split them in half. I trimmed them and I split them in half. So I had 30 half racks. And then every day for the next 2 weeks, I cooked at least half a rack of ribs, if not 2.
Were you eating the ribs?
Most of
you had to try them at least.
Most of the time I would share them.
You had to be so sick of ribs.
Yeah.
2 weeks straight.
I'm sure you ate some of them.
2 weeks straight of ribs is a lot.
But yeah, I think it was 10 days. I think I ended up with enough that I cooked at least 2 half racks every day for 10 days. And I just really like worked on narrowing down like every day. One half rack would be a little bit different than the other one, seasoning wise, or how I trim them, or how long I cook them for, or what I basted them with. Just a little bit different each day until I felt it was narrowed down, and I thought it. And don't get me wrong, I've cooked barbecue my whole life. Ribs just aren't.
Yeah.
They're just not my thing.
Yeah, ribs are, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. Like, ribs are kind of what everybody likes for the opinions of ribs are very different. What some people like is what I really don't like. Yeah, ribs are weird because they can vary so much. Like, they vary a lot in all aspects. Like the tech, everything about them can be so different. Okay, so how'd you do?
So I ended up winning.
Pretty solid.
And the two guys that I was cooking against, one's a close friend now. They're both great cooks. They knocked it out of the park. Both of them have been doing it in some professional capacity for a few years. So that was kind of one of those things where it was like,
I guess I'm all right at this.
Yeah, I guess, I always knew that I was pretty good at, like, we always did whole hog roast. I mean, the big thing is pulled pork. I've made pulled pork for family functions for as long as I can remember. But it's like ribs are one of those. They're pretty hard to nail. If I can nail ribs, then I can do the other stuff.
When was that? Do you have any like roughly year?
I want to say that was 2017.
Okay, so pretty soon after that. So
yeah, it was pretty quick. So the big thing is, so the way that event worked, shout out to Snoop. He puts on a great event. So basically, it's open to anybody and everybody can come, and he has a guy at the end of his driveway, and I think it was like $10 to get in, and you get an armband, and like you can go and sample the ribs, and you can there's kegs, and there's a band and a DJ, and basically the way it works is everybody can sample the ribs, and then basically once everybody sampled the ribs, they just like randomly select a few people, and they have them.
There's not even like there's just random people that are judge it. That's kind of cool.
It's just random people.
I feel like that might be the way to actually do it.
Well, and he picks people that I think that year the judges were like his wife's family that had come in from out of town, like they lived states away, so they didn't know any of us. They didn't know who made what ribs. He kept them separated from the rest of the party until everybody sampled, and then but there were, I mean, a couple hundred people there, and at the end we had someone come up and ask us for pricing. Their kid was graduating that year, and they wanted to use us for the catering. And I was like, maybe I could do this as a business. I mean, they said my dad's done it to make extra money.
Yeah.
For as long as I could remember, especially around this time of the year, whenever there's graduation parties and weddings and stuff. And it was always one of those things in the back of your head, like, if you need some extra cash, I know I can cook.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's completely different cooking for a lot of people. But I felt like I had some experience with that with my dad.
Okay. So that obviously is a big step towards doing that. So 2019, you decide you're buying a food truck.
So it wasn't right away that I decided I was buying a food truck. It was right away that I decided.
When did you actually get that? Was it 2019?
I think so.
Yes.
COVID makes everything a blur.
It was your first. You had an event the day before everything shut down, and that was one of your first, right?
COVID makes everything.
Yeah, whatever.
No.
Yeah,
dates mean nothing anymore.
I know you had one. It was like March 12th or whatever the day before was, because we were like, oh man, this might be like, I don't know, we might be done. It was at Whitehorse actually. Yeah. Okay. So either way, May you kind of that's when you start. Didn't get the food truck right away though. When did you make the decision that you were going to actually do a food truck?
So originally, the idea was to just do it on the side as a side business. But I've always been one of those people that, like, if you're going to do something, do it right. So I wanted to get to proper licensing. I wanted to be insured. I didn't want it to be, a sketchy side business.
Yeah. How was that process? Like, what was it like to actually get, first of all, to find out what you needed? That feels like potentially a giant pain in the ass. And then what was the process like to actually go through all of that? So was it difficult to find the information, and then was it difficult to actually complete everything you needed to?
So it's definitely more difficult than I thought to know what you need. There is a checklist, but they leave it very vague.
That's super annoying.
So for us in Washington County, we fall under.
Is the checklist based on county or state, or is it like a federal? Like, hey, here's a rough guideline.
There's no federal guideline.
Okay.
So every state is individual. Pennsylvania in particular does not have a health department per se for food. It falls under the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
Because we're an agricultural state. However, the county that Philadelphia is in, and Allegheny County.
Isn't that Philadelphia County?
I think it's.
It might be wrong.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
I think it's Kings County or something like that. I could be completely wrong also.
I'm going to look. Continue.
Whatever county Philadelphia is in, and Allegheny County, they both have their own departments. And their departments have a pretty standardized checklist that you can go through and make sure that you're going to have all the right things. The Department of Agriculture, they do have a checklist. It's kind of vague. I mean, mostly I was looking on forums, Facebook groups, trying to figure out what exactly I needed before, for one, to make sure that I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Because if you need all this crazy stuff, then if I'm just doing it as a side business, it doesn't really make sense to do it.
Yeah.
So it ended up being that I wasn't finding clear answers. I found a phone number for the Department of Agriculture, and I called and got connected with our local health inspector, and he was very helpful. He answered a lot of my questions, and he helped guide me along the way. I was able to call him at any time, and he made things easier.
That's good.
Now, I don't know if everyone would have that same experience.
I doubt everyone's getting that same, not the same treatment, but just I'm sure it's very dependent on who your inspector is.
Yes. And so basically what it came down to is if, I wanted to be able to operate and have no worries about who the health inspector was and what township, municipality, whatever I was working in, then the big thing that I needed was a sink. And for a tow behind barbecue deal, that you see set up on the side of the road, how do you have a sink?
Yeah,
there are workarounds. They have heated water tanks and that they use to wash their hands and stuff like that. But for me, it sounded like at this point, it would just be easier to get a food trailer. I should go back. Originally, the idea was a food truck.
Yeah, I remember that.
So originally, the idea was a food truck. I started researching, how much money I was going to have to put into a food truck to make it work. I still have Food Trucks for Dummies. They make a book for that. It's on my shelf at home. So the problem with the food truck is all the trucks that I was looking at in my budget were very old, not well taken care of, and in pretty rough condition. I was going to have to put a lot of money into them and then put a lot of faith in them that they were going to be able to stay on the road. So that turned into, trailer makes more sense. But, my truck breaks down, I can borrow a truck from someone. I know how to maintain a trailer. It's, pretty easy. So it kind of evolved into that, which my wife wasn't a big fan of. She was.
Man, it's quite the investment.
Yes, she was fine.
It's not cheap.
She was fine with us, doing it as a side hustle, making a little bit of money during graduation season. She enjoys cooking too. She liked doing the competitions. She was, she was into it. And then whenever I said, you know what, I'm just going to buy a food trailer, and she thought that was absurd.
I mean, it's kind of absurd, but like anytime you're starting a business, it's kind of absurd. Like, it's not like the easiest thing in the world.
Right.
And also in your case, you have to buy a trailer and set it up to be a commercial kitchen.
Right.
Kind of.
And meanwhile, I had a full-time job.
Yeah.
I still do.
Yeah.
But at that time, I had a full-time job working in Texas and living here.
So I could see how that would be perceived as a bit crazy.
Right. But in my mind, it made sense because there was room for expansion. If we decided to do it as a full-time business, we had the trailer. And on the backside of that, also, to buy this trailer, I was going to have to put a lot of our savings into it. I didn't want to borrow a bunch of money. So with that, it kind of turned into, this is plan B. If I lose my job, which...
It's oil and gas, so...
It's oil and gas.
It's always a possibility.
So if I lose my job, I know that the next day I can hook up to this trailer and I can go out and at least make money that we can keep a roof over our heads. So once we sat down, we talked through it. She was still hesitant, but she was a little bit more understanding. It did make sense to, instead of buying a new smoker because the one I had wasn't going to cut it, instead of buying a new one, for, X amount.
Yeah. And
then 3 or 4 years down the line, buying this trailer and then making that other trailer obsolete. This made more sense.
So you start actually doing this as a business. You went through all of the hurdles of getting licensed and getting, actually opening a business. So when you first started, how was that? When you started, did you immediately start doing events, or were you doing catering and stuff first?
It was mostly catering at first.
Okay. So how far along did you, roughly, before you started deciding, did you plan on doing events?
No.
Okay.
So the plan wasn't to do events. The plan was to just do catering. And then I honestly can't even remember who our first event was with, but they reached out to us. It was a friend of a friend or something like that. And then one of our first events was at Liberty Pole, the first time that they released the spiced whiskey. Mm-hmm. So that was
my first video project.
That was right around Thanksgiving. if I remember right. So we had a Thanksgiving themed menu, but that was one of the first public events that we had.
I forgot about that. Yeah. So that would have been. I don't know if that was your first one, but I think it may have. I think that actually may have been the first one.
The first public setup was at Rural King.
Okay.
We set up there a couple times, and it was just because. So the day before we were fully legal, inspected everything. I wanted to make sure that everything worked on the trailer. That way, when the health inspector came, everything was in working condition. And it was my grandfather's 90th birthday. So we cooked the food for his party. And one of the people that were there worked at Rural King, and they liked our food. They were interested in us setting up there. So that was I think that was the first place that we set up, was down at Rural King.
Okay. So what were, when you first opened, you first started doing events and catering, what were, obviously, like when you're starting out something like that, especially if it's catering or even maybe not as much events, but especially with the catering, if you've got a nice, decent network, those sales, they kind of just come. But what were some of the other challenges? Obviously, getting set up was its own challenge, like all of the things that go into that. But once you were open, what were some of the biggest hurdles that you had?
The big challenge for me was that before we even got inspected by the health inspector, like I read books, I read everything online I could find, how to do everything, how the food trailer should be set up that it will work the best. Sat down, drew everything out, drew a plan of so part of the thing for the health inspection for Pennsylvania is you have to send them a layout that shows where everything is in your food trailer, or your kitchen, and where everything is placed so that they can make sure that the spacing is correct for, and to make sure that you have everything that you need.
Yeah.
And I took that very seriously. That
seems like something that would be easy to not take seriously, and probably easy to just just kind of bullshit. But if you actually try to take it seriously, I feel like you can set yourself up to have like a good structure. It's like, yeah, I mean that like is a great foundation for figuring out how the hell the whole thing's going to operate. Okay, so that was probably a good move on your part.
It was, however,
okay,
everything is different in a food truck. So like it's a smaller space. Everything looks bigger on paper. Once you're in there and once all the shelves are full, there isn't a lot of room, and there was definitely some things that we had to work around to make things flow better. I'd say that was probably the biggest challenge that we had was in the beginning was getting food out the window quickly.
Okay. So how quickly did you notice that?
It was immediate. That, and we had problems with some of our equipment. We had trouble keeping food warm because the equipment that we had wasn't correct. So I won't serve food that isn't warm, for one, because we're not allowed for food safety reasons, and two,
nobody wants cold food.
Nobody's
ever been pumped that their food that was supposed to be warm came out cold.
Right. So that was a big hurdle that we had to get through to figure out, how we could set up the food trailer so it would work better. So we bought a steam table. It was electric, and I bought it through an online auction. So it was, I didn't see it before I bought it. Once I bought it, ended up being that it was electric, and it would have drawn more power than 2 of my generator could supply.
That's a problem.
Luckily, we sold it and actually made a little bit of money off of it. But we ended up finding, a propane-powered steam table that we could use to keep the food warm. With the cooker, it was originally supposed to be charcoal and wood with propane assisted. We found that in order to do that, the first time we set up, wind was a huge factor. We couldn't get the heat going fast enough to get food on to be able to start selling when we said we were going to start selling.
Yeah.
Which is partially because I didn't start early enough, even though I was there at like 5 a.m. But with the wind and it was a colder day, we were fighting that hurdle. So then it turned into, need to do something else with this cooker. We ended up converting it to pellets. So now it's basically a giant Traeger. It has 40-pound pellet hopper on each side of it. And now we can get up to 350 degrees in 10 minutes.
Yeah. So how did you, getting food out quicker, how did you approach that? Like, you knew it had to be changed, obviously. Like,
right.
That's a problem, especially when you're at events and you've got however many people placing their order. I mean, people don't want to wait in lines, especially when you're the only option.
Right.
And so how did you even approach that?
I mean, it's always going to be a struggle.
Yes.
We're definitely better than we were. Could we be better? Probably, but are we going to meet the expectation of the customer? Probably not. It's just not that I care too much about the way the food's presented and how it looks, and to make sure that everything's correct for it to go out much faster than we do now. But in the beginning, the big thing was to, set up specific job duties. Most of the time, it's just my wife and I in the food trailer. So it was really nailing down like, hey, I do this, you do this. You kind of stay on your side, I stay on my side, and it lets it flow better. Another big thing was incorporating tickets, which like the checks that they use at a diner, which seems kind of silly, but...
So what were you doing before that?
We always used the checks, but it was just to write down the order. And then...
So what did you switch to?
So we still use that, but that check goes up on a board, and they go in order of who ordered in what order, and then once that order is fulfilled by whoever's plating the food, they pull the ticket, they put it up to the counter, they yell out the name on it. Before it was kind of a free for all, just we take this order, we're calling it out, and
I could see how that would cause a little confusion.
Yeah. And a big problem that we have too, which we're working on still, is at the bigger events, especially breweries or anywhere where there's drinking involved, people come and order their food and then they just disappear. So you're calling on them to come get their food and they're not coming, and it starts backing up the window.
Yeah.
And then you have to worry about their food getting cold, and then them not being happy with their food just because they weren't there to get it.
Yeah.
So we started taking names instead of numbers. Names get people's attention a little bit faster. We were talking about using the little buzzer things this year, but we're not setting up as much this year. But it's definitely something that's probably going to get incorporated in the future. But just little tweaks to everything that we did have made
just finding
things.
Out those little things that kind of made just a little bit better. Because especially with your stuff, just viewing it, it's like there's so many little things that you can improve that, I mean, you do 10 of those, it's like, makes a difference. Just moving where things are placed, that can help. Like, just, it's just looking trying to look from the outside and view at what you're doing as an observer, just like, okay, could this be done, like each step of the process, could this be done better? If so, what is better? And is it worth the change? How much does it help? Um, so you worked through that. Obviously, there's always going to be a way to improve that. Um, what were that seems like a big one, like that you can try to plan for, but you can only do so much before you're actually in it, like,
Right.
and just figuring it out
And
as
that,
customers are
that's
there.
what I mean. I thought I knew exactly how things would work. I mean, I've worked in a kitchen. I've worked in a pizza shop in a faster environment like that. I thought I knew the way that the things would work. But honestly, I mean, the first event we were overwhelmed because I mean we opened up and there were 10 people in line already. And that's not what we were expecting. I mean, it was great, and I mean, a lot of people were happy with our food, which is awesome. But I'm sure a lot of people weren't happy with our food or service either.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I mean, our wait has never been crazy enough to the point where, it's still not as long as a sit down restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
people
but
at a
when you're
food
at-
truck,
yeah.
they're expecting.
Yeah, when you're at an event like that, you almost assume for some odd reason that it's going to just be super quick because it's a truck and not a restaurant. It's like, hey, they're doing the same thing. Like, they might not be cooking it fresh a lot of time. I mean, it depends on the food truck, obviously, but like barbecue, you've been cooking it for the last however many hours, so it's done, but it still needs prepared. Like,
Right.
it still needs to be prepared, whatever that means for whatever you're making. But so, what were some of the other, just efficiency, that is always going to be something, but what were some of the other things that you ran into immediately, um, that um, that were just struggle? Like, what were some of those immediate struggles, or just along the way that have kind of come up? Any I know we've talked about like events. Sometimes it's difficult to judge the food, like how much to make. Like, I know you've gotten better at that, but how have you figured that out? Like,
So with barbecue, I mean, it's different than most food trucks because if at least with me, if I make the food, I do not freeze it. Not saying that I never freeze our food. The only thing that we really will freeze is if we have leftover pulled pork, and I think once we've had leftover brisket. That stuff gets frozen and it gets put into the chili, or the if we do chili dogs, like it gets put into that stuff.
yeah,
We make all of the food fresh. It at the most, if we're doing a big event, some of the pulled pork may have been made the day before, but that's as far as we'll go with it. Everything that we don't sell gets donated to different shelters around Washington. So that is a huge struggle for barbecue, is food waste and knowing how much to make. One of the problems that we were having in the beginning is that we were selling out, and it wasn't a problem because it was gaining. It made our name grow very quickly because everybody wants food that's sold out.
Yeah.
Everybody wants everything that everybody else can't have.
Yeah.
So that made us grow quickly. However, it's not good if there was more money to be made left on the table.
Yeah.
And if we're set up at an event somewhere and we sell out in a couple hours and they expected us to have food for 4 hours.
Yeah, that's not good for the event.
Right.
Yeah, it's not good for the event.
But how do you judge how many people are going to show up to a public event?
So how have you done, like, how have you tried to do that?
So it's hard. Now that we've done it for a couple years, we track. Square is our selling system. So we use Square. We do a lot of the same events every year. So we'll go back on Square. I try to keep good notes of how much of everything that we used. I'll go back on Square and figure out, how many pulled pork sandwiches we sold. And from there, I can figure out how many pork butts I need to make.
Do you use any of the like Facebook event information? Like, has that helped at all?
So that's something that I started doing this year, is that every time that we've only set up a couple times, we're only setting up once a month this year. But whenever we are setting up, we're making a Facebook event, regardless of whether the venue or whatever we're associated with is making one. We're making our own. One, because it helps promote the event more if it comes up more than once, and also because it helps us get a gauge. But I mean, it still doesn't tell you much. It's not going to tell you everybody. It's more of like,
it's just another data point.
Right. If 30 people say that they're going on Facebook, then I can expect 100 people. Like it's, I mean, it's tough. Watching the weather very closely is another important thing, depending on where we're setting up. We set up at Steel City Harley Davidson. If it rains, we're not going to sell food. It's a Harley shop. So, but on the other side of it, we've set up there when it's rained, and we've had a really good day before. And, just if there isn't other things to do and, people can't ride their bikes, maybe they wanted to go to the Harley shop.
I wonder, there'd be so much tracking you'd have to do, but I wonder if you were tracking based on like some of the other events, like if you could figure out when there are this many events in Washington on Facebook, I wonder if you could use that to help figure out your metrics, or to figure out roughly how many, like there's got to be a way to get a little bit more accurate, but there's so much. I mean, you've got so many different factors that are going into that because of weather, because of location, the other events that are going on in Washington, because it's not like there's nothing going, like they're pretty regular. Everybody's regularly having events.
I mean, that's a huge thing that hurt us immediately post-COVID when we were, still in the you can go out but with a mask phase.
Yeah.
The biggest problem that we had, and I know it was a problem with other events too, speaking to other business owners, is there was too much to do. There were too many events. Everybody was like, okay, everybody can go out. We need to plan an event. We need to have a band. We haven't
had anything in
and
a
then
year.
You have, just live music. I mean, generally in Washington, you're lucky if you saw live music once a week, and then immediately post-COVID, there's 10 bands playing in Washington at the same time.
Yeah.
Like it's, but I mean, going back to the weather thing, so going off of that, you would think if it was really nice out, then we'd have a really good day. But it's not the case. And part of that, I think, is because, specific to barbecue, is if it's really nice out, you're going to grill out yourself.
Yeah.
So you don't want to buy someone else's barbecue.
Yeah.
So we kind of fit that middle of the line where, it's not too shitty out, but it's not too nice out either. Yeah. So that's why.
Well, luckily you're in Western PA, so
right.
Not a ton of nice days.
So with us not relying on this as, solitary income, my wife and I both still work full time. We've kind of changed gears with it, and, we try to, we only set up at events now, or at distillery, brewery, winery, that kind of deal, because there's going to be people there anyways.
Yeah.
And we can bring in people in addition to that. Setting up alongside the road isn't, for me, it doesn't make sense, because I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. That seems like you've got to be doing that. If that's your main source, then that can work. But you have to be doing that consistently. It can't be a once a week thing. It has to be like,
right.
People know you're going to be set up. It's just a matter of either where or they know where you're going to be. At that point you become just, a mobile brick, like brick and mortar. There's not the specialness of, I mean, you just have to be consistent with it. Like, that's it. If that's the case, the setting up every day can work because people aren't planning for it. Just like, oh, I'm hungry for lunch. Oh shit, let's go get this. I know it's going to be set up. Not people aren't going out of their way to go to a store to go get barbecue. Maybe they are every once in a while, but it'd be difficult to make that. Like you said, you can't know how much. Everything is so inconsistent. There's so much that you can't prepare for. Um, so obviously that's going to be. I
Yeah.
mean, I think you're making the right. Since you're not setting up as much, that's probably a good move.
Right.
I mean, that and catering, like.
Yeah, if it's just going to be our side hustle, then I'm going to remove as many variables as I can.
Yeah.
So, I mean, catering is an easy way to do that because especially graduation parties are kind of tough because not a lot of people RSVP for graduation parties.
Yeah.
But I mean, weddings are huge because you know exactly how many people are going to be there.
Yeah.
But they also bring on their own fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's okay. So those are obviously two big ones that it doesn't seem the efficiency thing you're never going to get perfect. Like there's always going to be better ways to do it, which is fine. Like as long as you're improving on it, like that's kind of all you can ask for. And really the predicting the amount of food, that is kind of in the same boat, which is just get better at it, but you're never going to be perfect unless you're like you said, remove as many variables as possible. So do the catering, do the events that you've gotten better at predicting. Are there any other things that stick out that that have been challenging? Those are big ones. Those are pretty big.
Kind of going off the catering, big one with the catering is giving people quotes for prices. So first off, you have to know how much food you're going to make, so you know what your cost is going to be, and then you need to figure out how much you want to profit from it. So for us, when we started out, it was right pre-COVID, beginning of COVID, meat prices were absolutely insane. I mean, they still are.
Yeah.
And it's not even that they're high; they're just bouncing around so much.
Yeah.
So that was a big struggle. Was we got burned a couple times early on in COVID, where we quoted someone whenever they wanted brisket for 50 people, and we quoted them whenever brisket was $3.99 a pound. Come a week before the event, and brisket's $8.99 a pound. So I mean, you can't say, hey, like I required you to put 20% down to lock in this price and then raise your price.
Yeah, that's not ideal. That is not ideal.
It's not. So we started quoting things kind of middle of the line. We started requiring 20% down to hold the date because a lot of events were getting canceled.
Is there a with that style when you're doing those types of quotes? Is there any buffer there? Like is there a way to build in a buffer, like a contingency that is, there's this much for meat prices that you may be paying lower, you may be paying more, but here's what, like, is that a thing in the catering business? Or
I'm sure that people do that on a larger scale, but I think for us it would more or less just confuse people or deter them from booking us.
Yeah.
So like I said, the big thing we did was, we kind of, I kept a pretty close eye on meat prices from our supplier, and we tried to go the middle line every time we made a quote. we tried to steer people away from brisket in particular because we knew that it was so volatile.
It's funny to refer to brisket as volatile.
The one wedding that we did do brisket for, I mean, actually 2 events, we did back to back whenever brisket was high. I was very upfront with them. I was like, hey, this is what I'm charging you for brisket because in the last month it's been this high, so I have to.
Yeah.
And both of them were accepting of it.
Yeah.
They both had our brisket and said, no, that's what we want. So they were both understanding. I mean, we've definitely had people that weren't understanding about pricing.
Yeah.
Especially with barbecue. I mean, it's the latest Pinterest craze is I do BBQ or something along those lines, where people do a backyard wedding and have a barbecue. And we get a lot of calls for people that are booking those, which is awesome. However, they see it as a less expensive wedding. Whenever nothing against wedding caterers, some of them do a great job and some of them make great food.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, that food it's just reheated food.
Yeah.
But they're willing to pay them, but not pay us just because it's barbecue.
Yeah, barbecue feels cheaper, which
Right.
is strange.
Because
it never is. Also,
it's insane to think that barbecue is cheaper whenever whatever you're comparing it to, I guarantee has less labor involved than barbecue does.
Yeah.
There isn't another food that has as much labor involved. Luckily, I've gotten really good at explaining that. When people, ask for a price, whenever I get the vibe that, they're thinking it was going to be lower than it is, I just explain it.
Yeah.
I have to do that on the food truck sometimes too. I mean, somebody buys a brisket sandwich and they don't want to pay the price, but they don't realize that brisket was 16 hours of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I do this on the side, but I do it because I like it, but at the same time, I wouldn't do it if I wasn't going to make money at it.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense. I mean, especially with as much as it takes to start the thing, like, you can't just be taking a loss every time.
Right. If I wanted to do it for fun, I'd do it for fun at my house.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have bought a food truck.
make a brisket,
or a food trailer.
So we've had, I've definitely gotten better at customer service, which I always thought was one of my strong points. In my past work experience, I always thought I was pretty good at talking to customers and talking through issues, but I feel like I've gotten better at it because of the food truck, because of the catering side of it. And it's, when people are rude, I just do my best to kill them with kindness.
Yeah.
It's
really all you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to argue with them? It's like, what?
But I don't know if it's so much a struggle, but it's something that is really gets to me is we've talked about this a few times, but I just got another call a couple days ago. We get calls all the time for people that want to book our food truck to come to their house for a private party, which is great. Yeah. That sounds like a great time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're only going to have 30 or 40 people, you're not going to want to pay what I'm going to charge you.
Yeah.
Because that's how they're going with, how much labor is involved in barbecue. Whether I cook for 20 people or 100 people,
you're spending the same time.
It's the same amount of time.
Maybe a couple minutes.
Yeah.
In prep.
A little bit more time in prep.
Yeah.
But cook time, me sitting there, making sure that, everything goes correctly, that everything stays hot, as the fire keeps burning, that, that's...
Yeah. That time is there either way.
Right. There's a cot on the food trailer. And like that's that's what I put it in the corner whenever we're set up and so on, but I've pointed at it a few times, like
I was there last night.
Yeah, like this is no joke. Like
that's why the sandwich is $3 higher than you thought.
Right. I sat next to that cooker for 12 hours. So I mean, we've even had people that have called to book our food truck and wanted their guests, all 40 of them, to pay for their own food at their party. Which I mean might work if you had more people and like a block party
like
type thing.
If you have enough.
But it's like 30 people. Like
you can't set. I mean, it's some people will set up. It's just barbecue would be difficult to do that. Like it's just not ideal.
Right. I mean, people look at us too, and they see it as that we don't have overhead because we don't have a brick and mortar. But I mean,
you have a truck.
I have to pay for maintenance on the truck and trailer. The big one right now is obviously fuel. All of that stuff adds on, and it may not be as much as it would be as a brick and mortar. It's definitely not.
Yeah,
but it's still there.
Yeah.
And I can't get the discounts that the brick and mortar can get because I don't have the storage capacity.
Yeah.
Because in the state of Pennsylvania, unless I have a commercial kitchen that I work out of, everything that we cook has to be cooked inside that food trailer, and everything, including paper products, like our side containers, have to be stored in that food trailer. So it's not like I can go buy a pallet of, whatever.
Yeah.
It's all got to fit on there.
Yeah. So I guess, let's a couple last things. One, are there any other massive issues that have come up that you've either worked through or not worked through or had massive trouble with? Like, is there anything else like that? Or, I mean, really, it doesn't seem like there's any major issues. It's just the big struggle is getting set up, like making sure you're legal, and then just kind of improving everything as you go. But really, it's not been easy, but like there hasn't been anything significant. But are there any any other issues, any other challenges?
I mean, one of the big ones was that doing this put a lot of stress on my marriage. When we started, we ran into issues. My wife was, she's my only employee. It's just me and her. So that was incredibly stressful. She had never worked in that type of environment, and
you get a little grumpy.
Yes. So
I can see how that was a little stressful.
I mean, I had things, in my mind, the way that it should work, and the way that it should flow, and nobody sees things the same way. So there was, some issues there, and I mean, we worked through it. We did better as we went along with separating, the food trailer from home. We got in the habit of, as soon as we were done for the day, I give her a big hug and a kiss, and I thank her for helping me because this is my thing. It's not hers.
You decided to do it.
Yes, I decided to do it. I mean, I did talk to her about it before we did it.
Yeah.
Which I think was important.
Yeah, I'd say so.
However, I mean, I pushed for it.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're constantly working toward.
Yeah.
So, I mean, talking to other business owners, I know some it seems like you either have to have a great relationship with your wife if they're going to be involved in your business, or keep them completely separate.
Yeah.
And those are that's the only way it works. So I wouldn't say that I want her involved because I like her input. She likes to cook. I think she enjoys doing the food truck. Once we're into it and we're doing it, it's the getting ready for it is the stressful part, making sure that food's going to be ready on time. And
do you think there's anything you could have done at the beginning to help that? Like how do you think you could have made that better straight from the jump? Because there's going to be, like, inherently you're working together, so there's going to be issues, and you're working together in a thing that you've got customers who, like we've said, are waiting in line. They're dealing with you're dealing with customers and you're trying to make them happy, but you're also working together. So is there anything you could have done differently to improve that?
So the changes that we've made that have definitely improved. Just the little things that we changed to improve the flow, getting the food out faster, reduce the stress in the food trailer, and it helped both of us. But a couple of the things that we did was kind of sitting down, not necessarily right after the event, but the next day, sitting down, going over sales, and talking about what went wrong, what we can do to fix it, and just better planning for the next event. The other one is checklist. We started using shared notes on our phones. The couple days before the event, it's a lot of going around buying, side cups and different, picking up the meat order, picking up, the coleslaw, and just getting everything together. And that can make a lot of stress, and making sure that we have everything, and that led to fights whenever one of us forgot something. So making the checklist, make sure that nothing got forgotten.
So it seems like communication is the big thing.
Communication,
which is always like,
it's just better planning, and just better planning,
better communication, which is always going to be if your communication is bad, it doesn't matter what the business is, it doesn't matter who you're working with, you're gonna have problems.
Right.
Like, people aren't mind readers.
Right.
It's that simple. People don't read minds, and people forget things. So,
and the biggest improvement is adding a third person onto the food trailer. So we started, using my cousins. They're younger. They need some work experience. Started using, all they do is take orders and exchange money. That's all they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, that takes some off of us, where in the beginning, Pam was taking the orders. She was helping expedite food while I was cooking and putting food together, and taking out the trash, keeping the generator full of fuel, keeping the menu up to date, talking to customers, and trying to do it all. And I wanted to be hands-on like that, and I thought that was necessary. But now it's less stressful for her if I'm actually doing less, and I can focus on cooking, and I just basically keep the steam table full, and deal with the little things, and talking to customers, keeping them happy, while she's able to put food together, expedite food, and get it out the window. So we kind of we found our strengths and kind of found a way that we can stick to them.
Yeah. That's similar to what Cliff and I talked about earlier too. Just figuring out you don't have to do everything. You don't have to. It's probably better that you don't.
Right. And I mean, it sounds like, to me, it seems selfish because, again, this is my thing. This is what I wanted to do. So I need to be doing as much of the work as possible. And she should be doing as little as possible because this isn't her thing. When in reality, it actually takes stress away from her and me if I do a little bit less, and she's doing about the same, as long as we have that third person. And I'm able to just make sure that things run smoothly.
Is there anything that you would do differently, or things that you would improve earlier or easy things that you could have done early to fix any of the issues that you ran into in any aspect?
Just mostly sticking to. So when the first time we did an event, I think I still have it somewhere. I made a binder, and I had pre-printed out sheets that basically said, how much of each item we sold, things that we need as far as inventory wise, and basically like it was like an event summary. And I printed those out, put them in a binder, and the plan was to do one for every catered event. We don't do them. I mean, we do to a certain degree.
Kinda.
It's on like the back of an envelope somewhere.
Yeah.
If I could go back, it would be getting in the habit first off of doing that. Now it's not a big deal because you can tell me how many people and I can tell you how much food I need. I know it now.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, I didn't. One of the things that helped a lot that I wish I had early on that I have now is I built an Excel workbook that has I can put in how many people are going to be at the event, put in the market prices for all the meat, and it'll tell me how much raw meat I need to cook to have that much cooked meat for these portion sizes, and how much profit I want to make off of that. I can judge off of that, and I can figure out from there.
Yeah, that seems helpful.
Yeah, it would.
It seems very helpful. Okay. You have anything else to add? Any other things that kind of stick out as either issues or things you could have done better? Anything like that?
No.
We kind of covered a lot. Okay. Well, all of your information will be in the show notes and summary. But what are all the Instagrams and Facebooks? Are you the same on everything?
No.
I don't remember what any of them are.
So it's rustedbarrel.com, and it has links to all of our social media.
Okay.
I think it's rusted_barrel_ BBQ on Instagram, and then Facebook is RBL BBQ.
Yes, it is rustedbarrel.com. And yes, there are links to everything on there. Okay, well, those will be down below anyways, so you don't have to worry about looking for them. They'll be down below. But you've also got one last plug, Bassettown Blend.
Yeah, so our Bassettown Blend is an all-purpose seasoning. It's just a all-purpose seasoning. It's similar to what my dad used when I was a kid. We just made a few tweaks to it. It's a Greek blend of spices, but it also has some citrus added. It's great on chicken and vegetables.
This is very difficult.
We use it on just about everything that we serve on the food truck has some of that in it. Everything from the mac and cheese to the ribs have a base layer of it. It's basically just our base layer for everything, and it's what we thought it was good enough to bring it to the public, and we're proud of it, and it's available for purchase on rustedbarrel.com.
It is. That link specifically will be down below. Oh, that's a cute picture.
On our it can be purchased on our food truck and through Facebook. And
your events and everything are on the website. All that's on there. Contact information, everything's there. So, anything else? Any closing remarks?
When does this come out?
July something.
Well,
third week of July.
Hopefully you guys came out and saw us at the Whiskey Rebellion Festival at Liberty Pole.
We need to update your your events too. I need to make a new event list. So, so Whiskey Rebellion Festival we might push this up since you have an event.
So the Whiskey Rebellion Festival is the 9th and the 10th. And then August 6th, we will be at the Rusty Gold Rib Cook-Off in Cannonsburg. It's going to be a town park this year. It's going to be a really cool event. They're going to rent out the park, have a bunch of vendors, and have a few more competitors than they've had in the past.
That'll be exciting.
We've done well there in the last few years, so it's a fun event. And then towards the end of the month, we will be at Steel City for their rib cook-off.
Cool. I'll put that we as if there's more than me. That will be in the that'll all be down below. And that's it. Thank you for listening. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for being a guest.
Thanks for having me.
And tune in to the next one, which will be, I don't know who it is, actually. It's scheduled. It'll be recorded. But, thanks for listening. Catch you on the next one. See ya. Thanks for listening, watching, wherever you're consuming this. I'm your host, Bradley Martin, and this is Clearing the Way, a resource for small business owners.